So, welcome to this panel. The aim of this panel is discussing of how maximizing FTTH ROI. So, my name is Domenico Di Chiarante. I'm in charge of Marketing Intelligence Committee of FTTH Council, and also I'm in charge of Marketing Department in Open Fibre, our wholesale only operator in Italy. In today's more mature fiber market, return on investment is increasingly depends on the ability to translate network availability into sustainable commercial performance. This includes accelerating monetization, reducing cost to serve, and enabling scalable upgrade paths to support new services over the time. This panel brings together senior leaders from vendor companies to discuss a practical end-to-end approach to maximizing ROI. From multi-gigabit services enablement to operational readiness and automation, to the next generation of PON evolution, and finally strategies that increase the CAP and customer value. So we will be beginning with Bjorn Kappens of Nokia, who will address the rise of multi-gigabit broadband and the role of higher access speed, premium connectivity, and automation in supporting growth and efficiency. Please applause for Bjorn. Thank you. Then Edward Bagnal of 3GS, who will highlight how physical network inventory, when integrated across system and functions, can improve service availability inside shorten time to revenue and reduce avoidable operational effort. So, applause. And next we have Claudio Rodriguez of Atais Lab, who will provide an overview of key next-generation PON technology, including XGS-PON, 50G-PON, and emerging VHS-PON, with a focus on coexistence, migration consideration, and interoperability to protect existing investment while enabling future capabilities. So, applause, sorry, Claudio. And finally, we have Kaja Arvidsson of Genexis. We discuss business strategies for monetization, rollout fiber, with particular attention to conversion in areas where very covered, opportunity in multi-dwelling unit, and experience differentiation such as Wi-Fi quality, security, and proactive customer care. So we look forward to an insightful discussion. Kaja, thank you. The industry can strengthen returns by alignment, technology evolution, operational execution, and customer value creation. So please, Bjorn, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well in the back? All good? I'll skip through this. Okay, perfect. Yeah, good morning. Pleasure to be here again on stage of this conference. I hope you're all still happy to be here. Let's keep it like that till lunch at least. Listen, when I joined this industry about 25 years or a bit more ago, the currency of broadband in this industry was megabit, remember? So if I would have been here on stage like 25 years ago or so, probably the title of my presentation would have been The Rise of Multi-Megabit Broadband, and you would probably all think that's a cool title, and are stuck with the same question, how the hell are we going to fill that multi-megabit pipe? Now look where the industry came after 25 years. We've done tremendous progress. And I'm quite happy that, from my perspective, because within Nokia, I'm in charge of the fixed networks or the fixed access broadband business in Nokia, in Europe. And I'm happy to share some of those reflections on this. Okay, first of all, we're in a tough industry, I find, in the sense that we're all appreciating, in a way, what broadband is bringing to us, but I'm not sure if we're all, as end users, valorizing or evaluating that much. No? I think we all spend hours and hours on our phones every day. Every one of us is probably prepared to pay for a new iPhone every second year. A lot of the consumers out there, including ourselves, pay several streaming packages or podcast packages and are willing to pay some euros per month for that. Then again, the pure pipe that brings all that precious broadband connectivity to the home is not valued as much. And people think we should take that for granted. And that also explains why in the industry, and the whole chain is suffering from that a bit, communication service providers, and probably technology players alike, we struggle with the fact that people aren't really willing to pay a lot for that. And the average revenue per user on mobile has actually been demonstrated to go down consistently over the past years. Now, this is a fixed broadband conference primarily, so I have a little bit of good news here, because if you look at the same evolution in the same period of time of the past 5 years or so, we did manage to get that ARPU up on fixed broadband. And there's no magic. It's simply because we started to introduce multi-gigabit into the broadband access networks. We've used that fiber infrastructure we've built, and thank God, this actually helps us to extract a little bit more revenue from the consumer base, with a staggering increase of 13%. Allow me to be cynical for a moment. Now, if you look at the different strategies communication service providers have been following, there's different types. On the one extreme side of the spectrum, some people have been increasing speeds, which you see on the horizontal axis here. And for higher speeds, they've been raising significantly the broadband subscription prices. And of course, they've been able to skim the market and make good benefit of that to increase some additional revenues from that broadband network. This is a strategy that was very commonly applied in North America, also Middle East, occasionally in Europe. On the other end of the spectrum, folks have been using this with only marginally increased prices per broadband subscription, simply to be competitive and to convince more customers to get onboarded, to also let customers churn from other operators to their networks, and actually make use of that to get more revenues on the totality of their deployment schemes. And it's fair to say that probably in Europe, in the large majority of cases, the truth is somewhere in the middle. A lot of operators have been defining small, medium, large size packages and have set prices accordingly, and probably psychologically managed to convince customers to go for that package that is slightly more than what people actually think they'll need. And that's probably an important thing in this industry. It's all about what you need and what you think you'll need. And that is one of the reasons, I think, why we've been hyping speed increases so much in this industry over the past decade. Now, oftentimes I get the question, but hang on. I know, in 25 years' time, we've gone from megabits to gigabits, so that's a factor 1,000. And we didn't have a clue 25 years ago how to fill a megabit pipe. But guess what? We still don't have a clue today how to fill a gigabit pipe. And probably you're right. In a residential context, there is probably no mix of use cases we can think of today that jointly justify the need for a sustained speed anywhere near a gigabit. I think operators in the room will simply acknowledge that. But that's not the point, because the point in this industry is all about what peak capacity can we provide at the moment in time when people want something and want it done in a split second. Because that's more important than the sustained capacity of your network. And why is that? Well, simply because us human beings, I would say less and less so, we have patience to wait for multiple seconds, to wait for web pages to load. Web pages that get, by the way, heavier and heavier. Think of those online web shops where now you get 3D models of whatever product you want to buy. That brings a lot of capacity to the web page. Well, you want that web page to be there instantaneously. Not going to wait minutes for that. Secondly, we put more stuff in the cloud now. We put our applications, our files somewhere in the cloud, and we want to keep using all of that as if it were sitting on a server right next to us physically. And of course, that will generate a lot of bandwidth up and down. And again, at any moment in time, we may want to access that, and we want it now. Simple as that. By the way, I don't know why I'm showing upstream on the bottom of the page and downstream at the top of the page. Requires a bit of thinking, but you can see here that beyond the sustained speed in the middle, there's going to be those peaks to deal with. And then last but not least, content creation becomes increasingly important. And that is, of course, also going to put a bit of strain on the upstream capacity of the network. And of course, you think of content creation as influencers who would take selfies all over the place and load them into the network. But this is becoming a big business. If you estimate, I think globally this business is estimated to be a 250 billion business. Probably that's going to double in the following 4 or 5 years. So that's a big business to be in. And clearly, we'll need reliable networks with a lot of capacity to be able to transport that, let's say, valuable content that content creators will provide, which may be high-resolution videos or all sorts of applications. Now, a small excursion to the home. We're at the Fibre to the Home Council anyway. So the network needs to be capable of sustaining all these peaks. But of course, like anything in life, an experience for a user is only as good as the weakest link of the chain. And guess what? And a lot of people of you will confirm, in broadband, the weakest link of the chain happens often to be the Wi-Fi in the home. Now, as an operator, you can do 2 things. You can blindly ignore, and you can try and educate your customers that that's their problem, not yours. Wish you good luck with that. Or you can do the opposite. You can take advantage of that opportunity and start to control the Wi-Fi environment in a way to extend your network beyond the doorstep, come up with a meshed Wi-Fi proposition, all whistles and bells, and dramatically increase and improve that customer experience. Because at the end of the day, people might churn from your network for the completely wrong reason. It may be their home network that needs to be pimped, has nothing to do with whatever you did in your network. That's all I want to say about that, because you want to create that customer experience that makes people loyal, that gets people connected and keep them connected. And by the way, here's a plus. Once you start to control the home network, you can probably use some sophisticated tools or apps to also gain a little bit more customer insights and use that in order to create further upsell. And that's what we're all doing today. We're going to find those opportunities to extract a few more euros per month per subscriber, which cumulatively is going to bring good benefit to the business. Now, we're at the FTTH Council, and we talk a lot about residential applications, but let's face it, multi-gigabit in the first place is going to be driven by what's needed beyond residentials. And yes, for ages, we've already been using plain vanilla GPON in those small and micro offices that we all have. By the way, this segment has been increasing past COVID. We have a lot of almost home offices that needed to be connected as if they were individual residential homes. So the same logic applies. And in the past 5 years, when we started to transform the European networks from plain vanilla 1 gig PON or 2 gig PON to 10 gig PON, which automatically gave the opportunity to multiply that capacity, needless to say that in the whole structure of enterprises we could serve, we see more and more addressable market here. Because not only can we serve the small and the very small and medium enterprises, we can also serve the rather large medium enterprises and the larger enterprises as the technologies for passive optical fiber networks continue to develop. Today, 10 gig PON is all over the place. 25 gig PON has been proven, is being deployed, can be used to offer 10 gig symmetrical, can be used to offer 20 gig symmetrical right now in an affordable manner. 50 gig PON is there. It'll take a while still before that gets affordable. But once it's affordable, it can address again all that segment. And guess what? We're not going to stop there. Technology players like ourselves, we will continue to raise the bar, and we'll make sure we can reuse the fiber passive infrastructure for decades to come with whatever speeds are needed at that point in time. Residentials, fiber to the enterprise, and let's not forget to think about what happens inside the enterprise. Because I find it ironic that we keep convincing ourselves in this conference that fiber is the way to go, and there is no other way to go. And then still, our offices, where we all go to work, even the new ones, continue to be built with cable inside, with copper cabling. And we continue to equip our local area networks with technology that is absolutely nothing compared to what fiber can provide. Now, technologically, we can demonstrate that optical LAN has the potential to, first of all, reduce your footprint, reduce your cabling, reduce the complexity, also bring large energy savings, and all of the above will lead to a much lower total cost of ownership. I mean, easy to convince people, logically and rationally. Now, what's the problem we face? There's two problems we face. First, the whole chain of the industry needs to be convinced, and it's a bit of a conservative chain. Because let's face it, a company owner is going to lease an estate from a real estate owner who's going to assign an architect and an IT integrator to provide an IT infrastructure for that office building. And before you know, down the chain, someone will come up with a great idea. Why don't we do what we've been doing for the past 20 years? It's proven, it's safe. I have people who do that. But that's rather looking backward. And I invite us all to be a bit more vocal in the industry to start wiring our offices of the future with technology of the future. And yes, it's true that it's easier to do that in a greenfield environment, but let's not forget, sustainability in Europe will drive measures to modernize our infrastructure, and I think we should take advantage in the next 10 to 15 years of that modernization wave also in this kind of segment. And by the way, when I speak about offices, you can easily extend that to campuses, schools, hospitals. Why not data center applications? Because there's a lot where this can be applied. If we talk about maximizing return on investments, we talk about revenues in any segment. We should not forget to talk about the other side of the equation, which is reduce operational costs. I'm not going to say much about this, but we're all still striving to make networks that are automated, are autonomous. We try to provide tools that people can use to reduce the cost of operation dramatically. By the way, very often when we do so, we also smuggle in those apps that can allow you to go for revenue extraction. So it's win-win, in my view. And you're going to do that during the build phase. You're going to do that in the network operation part. And when I speak about the home, also there, we have the tools and the means to make that more sophisticated. And I'm going to show you one last slide. Because in this broadband industry, we've actually progressively been evolving broadband through consecutive waves driven by the change of user behavior and the change of requirements. And it all started initially with the broadcast era, where there was the rise of the mass media, the internet, linear television, and the name of the game in broadband was coverage. We needed to connect as many people as possible to consume that beautiful broadband application. And then all of a sudden, people started to realize that the unicast became even more important than multicast, because we wanted customized content. We wanted to draw from streaming platforms and from social media what we needed ourselves individually, forget the others. And that, of course, has put strain on the downstream speeds, because all of a sudden, unicast was creating a different traffic pattern in the access network. If I speak about content creation, the upstream became super important. By the way, that's why fiber networks have much more longevity than any other option out there. And last but not least, I cannot leave the floor without speaking about AI for a second. And we simply don't know what AI is going to mean to us, but it's going to mean another big change to the traffic patterns in our network, and we better get used to that. Now, whether that is to steer the control of humanoid robots in home or in enterprise, or whether we find other smart AI applications, it's true that these applications will require deterministic performance, guaranteed bandwidth, reliable secure networks, and low latency. And that is, again, another parameter we'll need to use, because all of these capabilities will be needed to drive the real-time intelligent services that will mark the next generation of broadband. And guess what? Yet again, fiber will be at the foundation of that future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Bjorn. So, Ed, the stage is yours.
Please. Clicker. I don't work for Nokia. Hang on. Okay, you can hear me as well? Perfect. So, yeah, I guess what I've heard throughout this conference is I think we all have a responsibility in this industry to start to generate revenue, maximize return on investment whilst keeping operational costs low. I think that's what I've heard time and time again throughout this, through the opening plenary, all the other sessions. And so I think this is a really great panel to be on for that reason. You know, I'm definitely excited to be on it. I think we all have to play our part in that role. I want to talk about something that's maybe underutilized and not talked about quite as much in this space, which is leveraging the physical network inventory and the inventory assets to generate more revenue and keep costs low, the role that that has to play throughout that process, because in our opinion, we believe it's fundamental and paramount to a lot of the other exciting topics that are being talked about as well throughout this conference. So we'll start with a little bit of context and the lay of the land that we see when we're dealing with operators across Europe and the Middle East in particular, where we're focused, and then maybe an opportunity, and what might that opportunity look like if you were to leverage it and take it in terms of taking your physical network assets, which, let's face it, we've all put a lot of attention on for the last 15 years because we've had big capital investment and we wanted to build networks as quickly as possible, but now we don't necessarily all know what to do with it. You've got a lot of really good data out there. You spend a lot of time, effort on that. But are we really making the use of it now we move forward into this operational process? So just start with some challenges that we see. This is from 3GIS, working with the market, some symptoms that we see and some of the impacts that has is what we find. I think that it's fair to say that uptake on fiber has been a bit slower than a lot of the operators wanted. Build large networks, but not necessarily turning up customers and generating that revenue that they were expecting, which is putting a lot of pressure onto them. We have to say that the cost of serving is getting higher and higher due to inflation rates and other factors. It's getting more expensive, if anything else, to turn up a new customer. Fiber to the home even, but especially in the fiber to the business space, where you're still having to do build out and try to figure out how to connect two different places together. I mean, that's getting more and more expensive, if anything. And whilst it's good, I think we all agree that competition is good. from an individual operator perspective, you do have to be aware that it's becoming more of a saturated market in certain places. And so you have people who are competing for those same customers, and you're all feeling the same pressure to return the investment that you've made over the last 10 years. Some symptoms that we see around physical network inventory. I think that it's a system that has been invested in very well over the last 10, 15 years, like I said. I think it's a segregated and isolated system within the operators. It's very trusted by a certain subset of the companies. That'd be the engineers who have to go in and answer questions on a day-to-day basis around whether we have capacity to do X, or how do we fix a fault, right? How do we make sure that enterprise customers are diverse? Some of those more complex questions, I think it's trusted by that group, but it's not leveraged by the rest of the business at all. Right, so marketing, sales, operations aren't leveraging that data on a day-to-day basis is what we typically see within organizations. It's a very vast, large, complex data set sat somewhere that's not really being leveraged. We think the impact on that we see is that sales and marketing campaigns aren't necessarily aligned with what's actually achievable. They're aligned to what's aspirational. And within the sales cycle themselves, we find that decisions aren't necessarily being made in the smartest way, which can lead to churn, which can lead to missed SLAs and other factors as well. So whilst it's not necessarily the only solution, we're very aware of that. We really want the industry, and I challenge the industry to do this, is to reframe the P&I, the physical network inventory, as a life cycle asset. It's not a planning, design, build tool. It's a fundamental tool within this industry for the entire life cycle. It makes a lot of sense that return on investment is not just at the point of build. Right? You need to activate customers. You need to keep them over a long period of time. It's the same with your systems. You've invested a lot into a system to do a certain thing, but then not making full advantage and return on that investment over the entire life cycle asset. I could stand up here for hours and talk about why you need it for fixing faults and maintaining customer satisfaction, but really I wanted to focus on maximizing revenue up at the front, so that's what we're going to focus on now, and some of the things that you could potentially do, and what we are seeing some of our customers do if they start to leverage this data in better ways. So I guess the first one is smarter demand targeting. Again, I think that we live in a time now where certain things like geospatial intelligence, I started off in that space 15, 20 years ago now. It was a niche industry, very specialized. I think with AI and other tools that we have, it's never been more accessible. And we're starting to see people leverage it a lot more. And I think if you couple that with where your network assets are, then you can really start to make informed decisions about where you guys should be targeting for your next campaigns. Don't just target where you aspirationally want to win customers, but understand where the customers that are likely to buy your service are. But more importantly, where do they align to where you've got capacity on your network to actually be able to facilitate that? Where are the underutilized parts of your network as well, where you have made that investment, but you're not seeing the uptakes? Why do we have so much available fiber and capacity in this particular space? Maybe we need to diversify that section to the new emerging markets, such as data centers and leasing out fibers, et cetera, to answer questions about whether you need to diversify your portfolio as well. It's definitely something that you should be targeting. A big one for us is qualifying with certainty. Automation, I think, is such a critical thing within our industry in order to lower the cost to serve in particular, as most people on this panel, I think, will all agree upon and mention. I think only having and leveraging a good, strong understanding of your assets can you actually answer those questions effectively. Can we service that customer in a particular way? And stop the sales teams out there doing it based on fragmented data that's typically been copied out of your network inventory and put somewhere else to answer these questions more effectively. Well, to more quickly, I should say, definitely not more effectively. So we see this all the time. People will come to us and say, our sales team go out and quote to turn up enterprise customers, to turn up fiber to the home customers, and then we find out later that we couldn't do it. We have to go around a churn cycle, missed SLAs, customer satisfaction is through the floor. And we asked them, well, why did you make that decision? And they said, well, the sales team don't understand whether there's available fibers going down that road or not. And the data's there. It's just in a different system that's not being accessed and leveraged today. Some people are doing that, and they're getting ahead, but where it's not being accessed today, then we're seeing a really key gap and opportunity being missed in the market. And then finally, I think for me, speed to revenue is a really big one. We're working with lots of customers on automating the process of turning up new services. I think that only by having an enterprise solution that actually speaks to all assets of that is that possible. So I think you should be looking to leverage your network inventory and asset data within this cycle. You want to connect it into the provisioning systems. You want to connect it into the logical systems. You want to connect it into the CRMs so that you can actually automate the process from start to finish. Only by understanding, again, where there is availability on the network, could a system like a CRM automate the process from customer requesting through to actually activation. Right? We see that all the time. And faster activation is really critical. What actually needs to be done in order to service that new customer, and making sure that you streamline that process from start to finish as well with automated field tools, et cetera, putting power in the hands of the engineers to be able to leverage the correct asset data to be able to turn those up. We see this time and time again. I think if you do that, you can reduce a lot of that manual intervention. I think especially in the fiber to the business space, you're not going to completely get rid of it. Fiber to the home networks are very much laid out in a way that is almost designed to be automated at some point. It's very simple to get from an OLT to a customer because it's been built that way. But now that we're seeing more adoption from hyperscalers within Europe, which I fully welcome, backbone networks are being built, et cetera. I think people who have those networks in particular need to understand how I can get from A to B, given that more often than not, those requests will be ad hoc and different and random. I need to get from this city to this city. Can you help me, please? You haven't necessarily planned for that when you were building the network in the first place. So you need a system that will actually support you in the answering of those more complex questions. So I guess for me, the key takeaway, I'm sure it comes across in the presentation, I would challenge the industry to leverage the data that you've already invested in to help monetize your business. I really do think it's an underutilized asset today. I think we need to start changing our mindset from a planning and designing and engineering tool to one that's the full lifecycle asset tool that's going to support a lot of these great and innovative things that vendors are providing. This really is the bedrock and the foundation for a lot of that, is what we would say. And I think the people who leverage that data more than others are the ones that are succeeding in activation, monetization, getting better return on investment on their network over their full life cycle. That's where I'm going to leave it. That's okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So, please, Claudio, your stage to you.
Thank you, Domenic. So, hello, good morning. So, let me take you to the physical level right now. So, my presentation is about pushing the limits of fiber. So, a deep dive into XGS-PON, 50G PON, and a little bit of very high-speed PON, the future PON technology. So, networks don't evolve because they can. They evolve because they must. So what does the new service, the service of the futures, all have in common? They all demand more just bandwidth. They all demand evolution, so very high bit rate, very high fiber densification, so we need fiber to everything. Full convergence, fixed, mobile, enterprise, to support 5G, 6G, Wi-Fi 7, and even Wi-Fi 8. So ultra-low latency, high security. So nowadays, we are seeing already quantum communications over PON, high reliability. So we need reliable networks. So, but what are these services of the future? So we are talking about new type of industry, AR, AI-assisted, collaborative robots. So PON can be basically everywhere, and PON can support all these types of new services that are coming because it has enough bandwidth to support it. It has low latency, so it enables these new types of services that are coming in the future. So GPON has supported us till now. So it was a technology that was standardized around 2005, followed by a new standard that gives us 10 giga bidirectionally downstream and upstream. That was standardized in the end of 2015. And of course, we can see the adoption curves over there. GPON was mainly focused on residential customers. XGS-PON starts to bring us some business connections because it has enough bandwidth to cover some business connections. But 50 giga PON is the latest PON technology that has been standardized and has been standardized on the end of last year, on 2024. So 50 giga PON gives us 50 giga downstream and 50 giga upstream. So we can create multiple 10 giga connections and multiple real 10 giga connections to support over a PON real business customers. But this doesn't stop here. So on ITU, on FSUN, it starts to bring in new PON technology, so very high-speed PON that is intended to give us an aggregated capacity of at least 200 giga PON. So this new PON technology that will all coexist over the same fibers in order to enable the future services. So fiber is scarce, and the fiber spectrum is scarce. So we have to take care about the fiber spectrum. As we take care about the radio spectrum, so fiber, we have also to take care of it. Because we need to coexist all these PON technologies over the fiber. So in order to be possible to enable future PON technologies. So how we do this? We do this because we invest in technologies that enable higher density, higher speed, and higher power budgets. So typically networks are built over 1x32, 1x64, 1x128. So we need new photonics technologies capable of dealing with such higher power budgets in order to address such issues. So photonic integrated circuits together with indium phosphide, silicon photonics, it's a path to acquire this all integration. So building combo transceivers and that are enable several PON technologies over the same SFPs or over the same optical devices, diminishing the number of ports that have the OLTs in order to address different technologies on the OLTs. So there are different options for implementing this evolution. So we start with GPON, then we move to XGS-PON, and now we are starting to addressing 50 giga PON on the field. So different options were over the table, so it poses several field technical challenges. So we need to reorganize the central office if we decide to go with a coexistence element or a multi-PON model. So we have to take care about the fiber density on the central office. So if we reused the old system, so we keep the GPON and the XGS-PON OLT on the field, or if we invest on a new system capable of supporting the 3-PON, the newest technology, and support also the legacy technology like GPON and XGS-PON. So we need to support the new services. So in order to support the new services, we need new uplink capacities, new router bandwidth capacity. So we don't go just with 10 giga connections on the uplink. So we need to increase it to 100 giga, 400 giga, or even 800 gigabits per second in order to be systems totally non-blocking. So one thing that we have to take care, it's about power consumption. So new PON technologies have to be low power consumption because we have a lot of density on the OLT. And of course, we have to take care about the PON power budget. So we have the PONs that already are fiber, so on the field. So we have to overcome all the losses that we have already on the field. So the new PON technology has to cope the attenuations that we have already on the field. So we have to cope with the B+, with the C+, or even the D class that is 35 dBs. So, but this evolution is only possible because on ITU, we define different optical bands for different PON technologies. On this slide, what is possible to see, it's option number 3 of coexistence of GPON, XGS-PON, and 50-gigapon. So what we see is that 50-gigapon works on 30-40 nanometers in downstream, so in O-band, mainly because of chromatic dispersion. And in the upstream, in order to enable the coexistence between GPON and XGS-PON, it will work in between the upstream of XGS-PON and GPON in upstream. So this is the fiber spectrum that I was talking that is scarce, and we have to take care about it in order to be possible to coexist the technologies of today and the technologies of tomorrow. So when we look to the wealthy, and we need to protect the investment that we have done on the wealthies, we have to look to a wealthy that is capable of supporting not only the service of today, the service of tomorrow. So when we apply new line cards to that system, it has to exist some thermal management in order to support harsh environment conditions, but also that OLT has to be capable of increase their uplink capacity, be totally non-blocking in terms of backplane capacity in order to address the 50-gigapon, and also be capable of supporting line cards in pairwise. That it means that if we have GPON and XGS-PON nowadays, if we want to put 50-gigapon on a pairwise option, if we have 16 ports, we'll need 16 ports of 50-gigapon. And also, as I was saying before, it has to have reduced power consumption, and it has to have low noise due to cooling fans. If we, for example, put these types of OLTs on field applications or in street cabinets. Of course, when we do the migration from GPON to XGS-PON, we don't only take care about the OLT. There are several options to do this coexistence. Or we use an external coexistence element, like what we see here. So we have an external element on the OLT that is capable of putting together the legacy technologies with the new PON technologies. And of course, this option has advantages and disadvantages. One, we have to have enough power budget to put on the PON the coexistence element. Otherwise, because it adds some losses on the PON. And we have to have free slots on the OLT in order to address the new line card. So here are the advantages. So we keep existing GPON and XGS-PON OLT equipment on the field. Of course, as a con, we need free slots to add the 50-gigapon line card. So as an advantages, we can do a pay-as-you-grow approach. So we don't need to pairwise. Because 50-gigapon is not really a technology focused to residential customers. So it's a technology focused on business customers, special applications, where we need very high bandwidth. Of course, we can do this pay-as-you-grow because we don't need to address pairwise with GPON and XGS-PON, but of course we need a coexistence element to merge these new PON technologies. One advantage is that when we use this type of technology, we don't need to replace any GPON or XGS-PON ONUs that we have on the field, because we can coexist all the three technologies altogether. Another option is that we don't use coexistence elements. We use a combo transceiver that puts together all the three technologies together. So GPON, XGS-PON, and 50-gigapon on a single optical device capable of supporting the three technologies altogether. On this specific case, the operator just needs to replace the old line cards or place a new system that is capable of supporting the three PON technologies. And this is addressed with a single optical transceiver. On the same port, it supports the three technologies altogether, and we can grow the network on this way. So in practice, when we have this type of line cards that supports GPON, XGS-PON, and 50-gigapon, the same line card is able to support not only the three technologies altogether, but also the legacy transceivers that the operator has already. So probably you won't need to replace the optical transceivers. They don't just need to place the optical transceivers on the line cards. So the line cards are able to support GPON, XGS-PON, 50-gigapon, or all the three technologies altogether. So the same happens to the fiber organization on the field. So typically, we have already cabinets on the field, installed central offices. So going to new PON technologies, as I said, has some challenges. We need a fiber organization. We need to see if we have space on the central office to put more fiber, so fiber density. We need a reorganization of the central office. And here, AIs and augmented reality can help operators organizing their central office in order to do the inventories and to do this transition. So, because this cannot be changed as from one day for the other. So it's a transition that is slowly changed and slowly to increment the bandwidth on the PONs in order to support new types of services. So how this evolution is done? So on the times of GPON, we have just multiple uplinks on 1 giga or even 10 giga, and we could use DWDM. Of course, when we move to GPON and XGS-PON, the uplink capacity, as we have a density, very high density on the systems, we add new services, higher bandwidth consumption, so we add multiple 10 giga and could also use multiple 100 giga connections. Of course, when we go to 50 giga PON, and we have 16 ports at 15 giga PON, so in order to be non-blocking and the switching capacity, we have to enable the WLT not only to support 100 giga, but also multiple 400 giga connections on the uplink. Of course, when we go to very high-speed PON, when we are going to have 200 giga PON ports, it's not only increasing the capacity in the direction of the customer, but also increasing the capacity in the direction of the metro side. So 400 giga will not be possible, not enough, so we have to increase it to multiple 400 gigas or multiple 800 giga connections. So as a conclusion, so 50 giga PON interoperability with incumbent PONs, is critical for facilitating seamless multi-generation optical networks and preserving infrastructure investments. So I can say today that it's possible to build combo transceivers that are able to support the 3 PON technologies, so supporting GPON, XGS-PON, and 50 giga PON. One thing that we have to take care, it's about the fiber spectrum. So the fiber spectrum is scarce. It's like on the mobile. We have to address carefully when we take the next decisions, and we have to follow standards and ITU standards in order to follow in order to address specifically the spectrum. Otherwise, we could be blocked when we want to go to the next PON technologies. Thank you.
So last but not least, this class. Oops. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least. So what's the key thing to have an RNI on your network? Revenues. And where do you get revenues? From users, subscribers. So for the last session here, let's have a deep dive into, or at least a short dive into, where do we have opportunities today to find more subscribers to our network? So quickly about me. I'm Kajsa Arvidsson. I am the CMO of Genexis, and we are a strong believer in full interoperability between the OLTs and the ONTs, and we build all our gateways on open source software to enable good business on the gateways. So during these days, we've seen the panorama presentations. So we see that last year, we passed another 20 million homes. But we also see that there are 130 million homes that are already passed, but are not subscribing. So why is this? Why don't they subscribe? And what can we do to get them onto the networks? We see that subscriber uptake mainly comes from those who move from legacy networks, so the copper switch off. What do they see in fiber that they don't get in the slower networks? If we look on how we live in Europe, well, we have about 230 million households in Europe, plus UK. Almost half of us live in MDUs, so in houses where there is more than one family. So that's around 140 million households. And 60% of these households are older, the building is older than 50 years, which means it has a lot of legacy-built wiring. It's expensive, either because you have to renovate, there is a lot of bureaucracy. How can we attach these households to fiber and provide fiber speeds to them? If we look on Wi-Fi market, well, we see that the older technologies like Wi-Fi 5 and older are dropping drastically, while Wi-Fi 6 is plateauing now in terms of market penetration, and Wi-Fi 7 is growing rapidly. And I think we see the memory situation, it's mainly the Wi-Fi 7 2-band that is growing, but for those coming from a Wi-Fi 5 or even Wi-Fi 4 environment, it makes a huge difference. And somewhere around 2028, we will see some volumes that we can measure coming up on Wi-Fi 8. And I think what we really look forward there, added to reliability, etc., is that we get mesh into the architecture of Wi-Fi. So what do consumers want? How do we get them to our network? Why do they change from copper? Why do they go onto the fiber that is passing out on the streets? Omdia presented in the autumn surveys from 20 comparing to 25, where reliability and consistency of the service is the key reason for a subscriber to stay on the network. In 2020, we saw, as Björn was into, well, I want speed. That's an important parameter. But in 2025, when the parameter of security was added, that got already on the second place of importance, why I stay with my service provider. Customer services and good Wi-Fi in every room changed position over the 5 years. And in 2020, good value, so the price of the network was important, whereas in 2025, we saw fast download speeds coming. Last year in the FTTH conference, we ran a panel with frontrunners on XGS-PON. And we follow this up a year later and see what was different. And what they all report back is that it's really the in-home user experience that makes people move when they take another package of a speed upgrade. Will it become better in my home? Will I have a better user experience when I work from home or when I game, etc.? Or do I feel more safe? If we look on 2026 across surveys that have been made so far on consumers, on how do you choose a service provider for your broadband? Well, price and especially cost predictability, so the trust that I actually know what I'm going to pay for my subscription is the most important thing. Second is to have a reliable and consistent performance of my internet. Good Wi-Fi in every room, and this broadens up. It's not just to have a mesh, and we will look into this later, around what's included with good Wi-Fi in every room. Speed as hygiene, and then customer service. And across these, that the trust that I have with my provider, the trust that I get in customer care, the trust I get in the service, starts to become extremely important when I choose my provider of broadband. In yesterday's session, there was an alert in the inauguration speeches that was within the next 48 months, 50% of depth in our industry is due, which means it will become extremely important to operate cost efficiency. So I just want to make a little heads up that if you have an ONT that is interoperable with any of the OLT in a very consolidating market, you save a lot of money and you will have customers that have a reliable service because it gets right from the start. Second, we have these 70 million households that live in apartments that are older than than 50 years, and how to capture these. Well, if you start to deploy a solution that can reuse the wiring in the building, so you don't need the permissions, don't need the renovations, or in many countries there is a need to rewire the building if you start to renovate. There is still time for you to come down and see a demo that we have, a fiber bridge. So it's bridging the fiber into apartments over legacy buildings. It can be up in a day, and from an operator perspective, it looks like it's fiber, which means you can use the existing BSS OSS system. Security. I said that this was up in Omdia survey, and this is really an untapped potential as they see it, because subscribers today, they trust the service provider, but they don't really know what security I have and what is included in my subscription. And there are so many packages that you can create here and charge for, because the attention to the area of being secure, how do I make sure that my kids are not accessing AI services that suddenly expose all my family photos, all my bank accounts, etc. on the net? Can I do that in a parental filter? Do I know that I have botnet protection? Do I know that the new device that I bring into my home is actually covered by the security package that I have? Also, optimizing internet connection for purpose is included in this whole home Wi-Fi today. It's not only to have the right amount of mesh extenders that don't chat so much with each other that they're actually not performing, but it's also to have, for example, dedicated capacity for home working, that you have ping optimizers for gaming, that you can have device fingerprinting, and that you have quality of services that is optimized for each traffic. These are all opportunities to package and charge for, and things that consumers appreciate when they sign up for more services on their subscription. Customer care. I think any service provider knows this is where I really build trust, that I have good customer care, that I have someone who answers, whether it's digital, like in a chatbot that really works, or it's a person. This is where I can show that I care, I see your network, and I respond to your issues. We have packaged this into different concepts of home run, but that's also like an idea of how others can copy and make the same packages available to your subscribers and charge for these. I didn't mention, but a good application is, of course, essential also in the customer care relationship. That is easy for me to maneuver, it's easy for me to put in filters, it's easy for me to see if something happens on my network. And with that, I leave you some minutes because I speed it up.
Yeah.
I know you want to ask us some questions.
Thank you very much. So let's starting with some question. I would like to start with Edward. Sorry. Given that companies have network inventory, what is a barrier to them to leveraging it to generate more revenue?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So, if I was just to boil it down to one, I know we're a little short on time. I think that people have been trying to build networks as fast as they can. So the tool has just been used as fast as it can be used, rather than putting attention to data accuracy. You know, focus has been on build, not necessarily on the long-term investment, and that made a lot of sense at the time. But I think that a lot of the value you can get in that system, one of the barriers is not necessarily having 100% trust in the data. And I think there needs to be a consolidation and cleanup exercise that happens when the time is right between now and the next 5 years or so, I would say.
Thank you. But you think also some AI tool can help marketing department in order to leveraging from network inventory and also data outside?
Yeah, definitely. I'm always encouraged when I come to these types of events and hear the technologies from a lot of inspiring vendors, and I think that the AI community is pushing that along quicker, which is great. So I think there'll be a lot of auto discovery type tools that will help with that data cleansing work, which will then provide a much better bedrock long term. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Claudio, I'm also asking you, but what do you think are the services that generally require multi-gigabit PON speed? XR, VR, gaming, edge computing, AI. What do you think?
We have always prepared the network for service that don't even exist in the past. Okay? So if we look to the past, before COVID, no one was using Teams all day to do meetings. And we prepared the networks to support such types of services. So we are on a stage that we have to look to the future in order to support the future service that some of them could not even exist. But 50 gigapon, it's not really a technology that is focused for residential customers. Of course, it enables a lot of bandwidth that could enable holographic communications, immersive applications, augmented reality, but it's not really the target. The target is to give real bandwidth, high resilience, security, and also enables future mobile networks like have enough capacity to support 5G, 6G. And we have to carry the data for the hyperscalers, okay? So hyperscalers are doing the AI, but we have to carry the data from the edge of the network to there, okay? So we need resilient networks with enough capacity in order to enable the AI applications and all the augmented reality applications.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So Kasia, is the rapid growth in AI usage an opportunity for operators and ISP in terms of business growth, or it represent a risk or a cost and complexity burden?
So if I take from the household perspective, I would say it's definitely an opportunity. There's been many good presentations here over the last 3 days around how you start from the Wi-Fi gateway as the hub of AI in the household, and you build from there. For example, there was a presentation by A1, sorry, who said, well, data shouldn't leave the home if it's not necessary. So, like, use AI in the home, consolidate it as much as you can, and build on your trust as an operator that it will remain there. If it can't stay on the home but needs to go on the edge, keep the edge closed so it doesn't leave the country, it doesn't leave the network. And here to start to really provide this with talking about security, enabling services that make you feel sure when you start to elaborate with AI in your household. And then you can provide the services into this. So yeah, definitely. I think if you compare to how mobile industry really lost out to the OTT players because of convenience and rushing it away and trying to charge for any bit and service too early. And people just say, okay, I give my location, I give my privacy because I want this convenience. Don't fall into this trap now, but rather test it and see that there is a great opportunity already to get subscribers and make them feel safe. Then I think we will have a very good opportunity for our industry with AI.
Yes, so we also see new Wi-Fi sensing technology, and also the router that every operator ISP provided to end user could be the AI hub in order to provide new services. And also, I see a very interesting Wi-Fi sensing use case without install other equipment, analyzing Wi-Fi or the data that the router collect every second. And with the AI in the cloud, also you can define introduct in the portfolio new services, because I think that the customer doesn't buy AI, the customer buys services and buy simplicity.
Yes, I mean, we want better life, easier life, faster things.
Yeah.
We don't buy AI per se, but we want to feel safe. So we want to be in the context of someone who makes us feel safe. And I think that we as an industry need to deliver on.
Okay, thank you. So, Bjorn, we're talking a lot of aspects. So, can fiber broadband operators monetize other aspects on their network beyond to speed?
Well, I think it's a good wrap-up question. I think all of us kind of addressed that question collectively. The one thing I would say, people don't need speed for the sake of speed. For sure, broadband works a bit like a drug. You taste the speed, and then all of a sudden you need the speed. But in the end of the day, the speed is going to be what you need in order to get your instant gratification. For example, you don't wait hours to download the newest game of a couple of hundred of gigabytes. You want it there in a couple of minutes. But what is going to be a challenge in the industry, though, is that it's easy to market speed. You don't need to be a marketing genius to explain that 3 gigabits is better than 1 and 5 is better than 3. But when I mentioned, for example, the importance of latency, and it came back in some of the other presentations as well, it's much more difficult to explain to a broad audience what it means to have latency of half a second or 50 milliseconds or 1 millisecond for that matter. So I guess we all need to challenge our marketing brain a bit to think about how can we translate that to user experience, and rather talk about use cases and visualize to people what is the longevity of networks that have the right speeds, the right latency, the right reliability, the right security levels. I think we simply need to visualize that as how will that enable us as a society. That's what I would invite us to do. And then I'm pretty sure we can use all of that to extract much more value from our fiber infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much.
And if I can add to what Björn is saying, if you go to an average person, we are actually much more related to latency than we are to speed. Speed is very, okay, if it's a number, but it's very intangible, versus latency we experience every time we have a problem. Right, it can be extremely annoying if it's not good.
Okay, thank you very much. So the time is finished. Thank you very much.